I'm part of a neighborhood book club, and I really enjoy it. Not only do I get to know my neighbors better, but I also get to learn things that I previously didn't know and also maybe didn't have any interest in, like being in the mines, which is the case with this book called The Tomboy Bride. So, The Tomboy Bride is written by Harriet Fish Backus, and it is about life in the San Juan Mountains in Telluride, Colorado, a place that I've never had a desire to visit. Not until recently. I happen to have some friends that have moved there recently, and I've seen some pictures, and Colorado looks absolutely beautiful. It's a gorgeous place. And I really would like to go see it one day, but I would not like to go to the mines. So, the cool thing about being in book clubs and reading books and stuff is that you really get to see other people's point of view, their interests, and their reasoning to why they did or didn't like a book. And it was so interesting to sit in the book club this last time that we had it because we all had various reasons as to like why we liked certain parts of the book, but it just seemed like the general consensus for this book was that we didn't really like it that much, and for like a lot of different reasons. So one person in our book club happened to be a professor in a former life, and she brought up that this book was often recommended in like women's studies classes and things like that. And we were just like, really? Why? Because when you think of like women's studies, you think of studying like women's like liberation, women's rights, celebrating a woman's independence and separation from like what is normal, what is standard, right? And it kind of just seemed like Harriet, because she's telling, she's telling an account of her life. It just kind of seemed as though she was following pretty traditional marriage roles, which, is okay. But it didn't really seem like she did anything that was out of the ordinary for a woman of that time, like a pioneer woman in the early 1900s. It didn't really seem like she departed or like diverged from what was expected of a woman of that time. So we were just like, why? And one of the reasons might be because of the title. So, like I said, the title of this book is Tomboy Bride. Now, like, let's be honest. You see this title, right? And you think, Tomboy Bride. This might be someone who's outside of, like, the gender norms, who is performing roles that might not necessarily be specific to what was expected of a woman, especially when you think about those 4 tenets of femininity and what was expected of a woman during that time. And when I say early 1900s, we're talking, this book like takes place as early as like 1906, 1907, and so on and so forth. So we're like really around that time. And she didn't really do, I would say, in my opinion, she didn't really do anything that would deem her to be a tomboy. And as a matter of fact, and this is just a little spoiler if you decide to read it, and I do suggest that you read it, because even though I didn't really enjoy the book as much as I wanted to when I started to read it, I learned a lot about altitude, animals like horses and donkeys, and donkeys are strong. They can carry a heavy load. Okay. So, yes. So she didn't really do anything that was outside of the norm. And the spoiler is that the Tomboy Bride is named so after the mines, of where she was. And it wasn't necessarily attributed to any behavior that she had. She was a wife. She eventually became a mother. And there was something else that was pointed out to me that I thought was really, really interesting. And that is, I really enjoyed the first half of the book more so than I did the second half of the book. The first half, there's this woman, she is following her heart. She's following adventure. She is, going to do all of these these things that are out of the ordinary for someone from where she's from. I want to encourage you to read the book and then come back and we can have more conversation about it. But the second half, it seemed like even though there were some eventful things that happened, even the writing kind of slowed down. It didn't really seem as though there was much passion behind the voice that's in the first half of the book. And someone pointed out, well, in the first half of the book, she doesn't have any children. Now, there are children present. Like, there's people in, like, the town that she lives in that have children, and she experiences, being in the presence of children in that way. But she doesn't have her own until the second half of the book. And the tone really does change. And it reminds me that as a woman, as a parent, as a mother, that your life does change after you have children. And sometimes the pace can change. It didn't prevent her from doing the things that she wanted to do, just like for us that decides to be parents. Being a parent, it doesn't prevent you from, being aspirational. However, sometimes the pace at which we do those things, it changes. So there was that. There were also, in my mind, when they describe the house, I basically just think of a box with 2 rooms. So they live in this really small home at the top of this mountain. And I say that, but it's just it just seems, the way that I read it, it just made me feel like, oh yeah, they got dropped off the top of the mountain. It was really hard for them to get food, to get anything. And as a matter of fact, she had to put in an order to get like their household items and things delivered. And it's only once a month. So just imagine, like, how many of us go shopping 2 or 3 times a week, twice a week, or whatever, what have you. And maybe there are some of us that do that big Costco shopping just once a month. But she accidentally ordered 100 pounds of sugar. And she just played it off like, oh, I meant to do that. That wasn't anything that is out of the ordinary. But could you live life in the Telluride Mountains? So here's one of the things that, that I think is really interesting about books like these. And that is that there's discussion questions in the back. And so I don't usually go through the discussion questions, but I've been doing that lately with a lot of the other books that I read. And so why not? Let's read the first one, right? So the first one, it said that, and this is a spoiler if you didn't read it, okay, which you probably didn't, because they're recently celebrating 50 years. This is the 50th year anniversary for this book, right? So 50 years since the book was published. So in the back, there are some book club discussion questions. And in our book club, we didn't really go through questions like that. We kind of just ask a starter question to get things moving. And that one question always leads to like more discussion, right? So in this one, I'll just read the first one and then I'll just give you my opinion. I'll just give you my answer. So Harriet lived in a time of distinct codified gender roles. As a mother and housewife, she always knew exactly what was expected of her. From all accounts, she was confident, happy, secure, and she drew great satisfaction from her relationship with her husband. Today, a woman is encouraged to choose the way of life most appealing to her. Is it possible that having too many choices might sometimes lead to confusion, unhappiness, and dissatisfaction rather than proving a means to prevent them? I think that, when you think about women and choices, you think about woman's choice and a woman's right to choose, right? You think about a human being's right to choose. I think we thrive on having the ability to make that choice, whether we are, male, female, man or woman. I feel as though having the choice makes a difference. Sometimes we go through life and we think we have choices when really we just have a series of options set before us that are limited, giving us the illusion of the choices that we have, right? But even when we're giving the small choice of just yes or no, will you or won't you, do you or don't you, yay or nay, it is empowering. And I think that having choices, having an abundance of choices, empowers us. And it also gives us the responsibility to be more informed. Just think about your stroll down any aisle at the grocery store. There are 1,000 different choices, right? For breads. Okay? So you can choose the bread with 5 grains, 7 grains, or you can choose the bread with 21 grains. You can choose wheat, white, rye, okay? Or you can decide that none of these shelf-stable breads will do and go home and bake your own bread. Choice. It is empowering, right? Because there might be something about any one of those shelved breads that you decide are unfit for you and your family, or you just want something different. So choice, I think, is empowering. And I don't think that limiting the choices that we have is necessarily easier, especially, I mean, like the way that it's put here, it's not going to cause me confusion to have more choices. I think that anyone worth their weight in brain cells are going to say, if I have a choice, I'm going to feel empowered. If I have a choice, I'm going to feel seen. You take that choice away and no one cares about your choice. Do you even feel as though you are valued? I don't know. I think that is, at least in my opinion, something to consider. I think that if you take away anyone's choice, you devalue that person to be able to make a decision for themselves. Or even you take away their worth. You're not worthy to make a decision for yourself. So that was a weird question, but the question is in there. And it's also a question that you might want to ask yourself. Do you think that when you are presented with a number of choices that it causes you confusion? Are you confused with all your choices? As an adult, not as a child, right? Because when you become an adult, you do adult things like making big decisions. We make choices every day. We have how many thoughts a day, right? So, is it possible that having too many choices might sometimes lead to confusion, unhappiness, and dissatisfaction? Not for me. Give me a choice. Anyway, so that was my reading. I read the Tomboy Bride. I do think that the title is misleading. However, even throughout the book and as you read the book and you understand what she means when she says tomboy and what she's referring to, I think that I think that you can kind of like understand more where she is coming from. But I think that at that time, saying tomboy it may have, I don't know, I wasn't around in the early 1900s, and maybe someone who has like documented like historical evidence from when the term became popularized to refer to girls that had interest in what is genderfied as male activities as tomboys. I don't know. We'll see. But my rating out of 5 stars for the group was a 2.5. However, if you go on to my Goodreads, I gave it a 3. And my first reasoning for me giving it a 3 was I didn't know how to half the star on there. And I didn't want to just give it a 2 because I really felt like I learned something. Like I said, I learned about altitude. I learned about animals. And Harriet really did have deep affection for animals and the treatment of those animals. And I learned about pack rats and really a thing. And I just learned about life as a pioneer woman in the early 1900s trying to survive harsh weathers but still finding a way to find a comedy in life, right? Between the United States and the natives or indigenous people that were there at that time so that they wouldn't mine certain parts of the land. However, the treaty was not satisfied or it wasn't respected, and the mining continued, and basically wherever there was potential for gold and other valuable mining materials. So That's one thing to think about as well while reading the book. There were just so many takeaway points that, yes, 2.5, because I didn't really enjoy reading it. And the longer I read it, the less satisfied that I became while reading it. However, with that said, the longer I read, the more I learned. And so I think there is always something to be said when you have a didactic experience with a book. So thanks for hanging out with me. And thanks for hanging in there with me as I continue to read for fun, because I really do enjoy it. I really do enjoy the experience. And I'm really enjoying sharing that experience with you guys. Thanks. I'll see you guys soon.